6:29 actually, and oh, 6:30. I defer to you on that.
That's it. Doesn't it have to, don't we have to wait until 6:30 just to make it official?
About 6:30.
That's what I thought, 6:31. Now it's 6:30, okay. Roll call, Alex Dukeman.
Present.
Matt Crabtree.
Present.
Melinda Ellswick.
Here.
Lauren Cooper.
Here.
Cash Parker.
Here.
Ken Chu.
Here.
And then Eric Sampson and Brian Isom are here for Community Development Department, as well as Sergio Renteria from the City Attorney's Office.
Thanks, Eric. That brings us to approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Is there any discussion about those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve them? There's a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 That's everyone in the room and
Oh, I have to abstain because I wasn't here.
sorry, and one abstention. So that motion carries. The minutes are approved. Public forum, I do not see anyone from the public present in the room. I don't see anyone online. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that moves us to item number 4, which is the Robert's Rules of Order overview with the City Attorney's Office. And welcome again, Sergio. Thank you for joining us.
Always my pleasure.
I'll turn the floor over to you.
Melinda, if you can't hear me, just raise your hand, okay? All right.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So luckily for you guys, and hi to everyone who hasn't seen me before.
Oh yeah, would you introduce yourself and talk about what you do in the City Attorney's Office? I just realized there's new commissioners since you last joined us.
My name is Sergio Renteria. I'm with the City Attorney's Office. I'm the Assistant City Attorney there. I work with the City Attorney Tamara and our Deputy City Attorney Vicky to just kind of cover boards upon request. So I'm here upon request, and I'm almost certain that I'm the first and only Sergio that's ever worked for the Inglewood City Attorney's Office. So, some new things. Recently, City Council, about 2 weeks ago, actually adopted the 2023 version of the Bob's Rules of Order. They adopted them with some amendments. A full copy of the book, which it's pretty short, it's about 200 pages, but it's like big print, should be available at the clerk's office, because we actually bought books for the city. So there should be one in the library, and there should be one with the clerks that we can that anyone can actually request to take a look at. I would have included the actual PDF version, but I'm uncertain about how I can just be handing that out for free. But if it's not an issue, I could provide one. So Bob's Rules of Orders are just simplified rules of procedure that a guy named Robert something Widener came up with for public meetings. He's covered a lot of public meetings, and he created these simplified Bob's Rules of Order, because Robert's Rules of Order, which what everyone thinks we use, is like an 800-page book, and it's super like complicated. No one would ever remember that. So he came up with these rules that are made for local governments. And the bylaws of the Historic Preservation Commission actually provide that you guys will use the latest version of Bob's Rules of Orders. And about 2 weeks ago, Council adopted the 2023 version. I believe before then, it was either the 2013 or 2018 version that the city was using. Don't quote me on that. I think it was 18, but we may have only adopted the 2013 officially.
Pull up the presentation.
Oh.
I think it's or I can share it.
Okay. It's in the packet as well.
You might have to share it so that Melinda can see it as well.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. go slide 3, Eric.
Okay.
Okay, so essentially the purpose of the rules is efficiency in public meetings. They manage the conduct of the meetings. It's a procedure to open, consider, and debate the matters that are before the board. And it also, since the board is a quasi-judicial board, it also essentially helps defend the decisions that you guys make. It also allows for flexibility, such as the chair can suspend the rules if it's so more efficient to do so. And the rules do provide for that. You just want to push it. Now, here are the rules. The rules essentially, they have terminology in there. And then these aren't all the rules, but here are the ones that are kind of more important for running a meeting. They discuss meetings in general. City Council supplemented 1.4. Quorum, presiding officer, the floor, motions. 5.6 was amended by City Council when they adopted the rules. Friendly requests are like requests to amend, request to withdraw a motion. Voting, 7.10 was amended by City Council. It provides for rule suspension if so. Points are motions, but they don't need to be seconded, and they can be brought up at any time. And then general motions. And council made amendments under Council Bill 39. It's not yet in the code because it's so new, and we still haven't waited the process for them to adopt it, but they did adopt it at second reading 2 weeks ago. And the motions is when you kind of move, like, we'll get into what motions are in a little bit. So the points, there's point of order, point of information, point of appeal, point of decorum. In the actual amendments that City Council made, they did articulate what they wanted point of decorum to be. And it's Council Bill 39, and it's under the Muni Code. It would be 1528 Rules of Debate and Parliamentary Procedure. And one of the points that they did change was point of decorum. It basically reads that it allows a member to ask the body as a whole to review an act of a member for conformance with the rules of decorum. And then the motion. There are principal motions and motions to reconsider, motions to adjourn, motions to continue, motions to amend, motions to close debate, motions to recess, and motions for executive sessions. Motion for executive sessions are when the board wants to have legal advice. It has to be noticed and motioned. Therefore, main motions, principal, continue, reconsider, adjourn, and all motions must have a second. So in order to, essentially the chairperson would have to recognize someone and give them the floor, and then they could make a motion and that motion would have to be seconded. Now the way this works, like through a meeting, would be an agenda item would be open, essentially announcement to the body that the agenda item is on the floor. There'd be a presentation, so information would be given to the commission, or in a quasi-judicial hearing, they would hear a formal presentation of evidence. There'd be a discussion, and essentially the board could ask questions and discuss the information, and in a quasi-judicial hearing, there'd be like questions and clarification on the evidence that they heard, and then a board member would give a motion based on the information that was offered, or approving, like in a quasi-judicial hearing, approving like an application. The body would debate and discuss the motion, make amendments, etc., and then they would essentially vote on it. All right, any questions? No questions?
No.
You guys got it down?
I mean, I guess, is it any different than how we've been operating?
Not really. The Bob's Rules of Order is a 2023 version. He just like tightens it up every year or every couple years, just makes small amendments. It's essentially what the board has been doing the whole time. The council adopted the new rules. They kind of took out some stuff and made it like leaner when in their adoption, and kind of included stuff that they like, but it's essentially what we've been doing this whole time. And the chair can always kind of ad hoc the proceedings if they so desire, if it's more efficient. And for you guys, this really comes down to when you guys get an application, part of the quasi-judicial hearing stuff, it'd be really good to just kind of adhere to the process. The application holder gets called, you kind of hear their presentation, the board asks evidentiary questions on that kind of stuff, a motion, and it would help just kind of support any decision that is finally made to just kind of keep the process clean. What the rules also implies that one person speak while they have the floor, no kind of side discussions, no interrupting, and just let the chairperson kind of run the meeting, allowing every member to kind of interject as they go along. Simple?
Sure.
I mean, if you watch a lot of meetings, and I do, it's just, you kind of get it, and you guys have been doing it, so it's just kind of the process. It's just an overview and to let you guys know that we now are the 2023 version of the rules.
So I do have a question, Sergio. So you said that the 2023 version that was adopted as amended by council, it's only available in like a print version in the clerk's office right now?
We have the actual books in the library and in the clerk's office. I have a PDF version. I'm just not 100% sure how I can be willy-nilly sharing that.
Is it like a licensing copyright issue?
Yeah. The version I have, I actually got through CML. And because the city attorney's office pays for CML membership, I can get it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone else would have to go on there and buy it. So I'm not sure if I can just give my, like, here, everybody, here's my electronic copy, go for it. I will look into that. And if it's not an issue, I can give it to Eric and he can just distribute as necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't promise that I'm going to study it or anything like that. However, if we, for instance, had a hearing on an application, it would be nice to have it available as a reference if we had some sort of procedural issue around it.
I get it. If that were to happen and I wasn't able to share the PDF version, I would just have to add my name to the wait list for the clerk's version.
Sure.
There's no wait list.
What?
We'll also make sure that when we do have our first public hearing on one of these, make sure that
Yeah.
Sergio is available for us.
Yeah, no, if you guys have public hearings, I can be here. I'm at P&Z, I'm at Board of Adjustment and Appeals, or all the other quasi-judicial ones, and I'm always there. I can make sure that I will get the book.
But you can provide us with the amendments, right?
Oh yeah, the amendments are in the council bill. I mean, I could send those to Eric. It's the version that they approved. It's all like lined out and stuff.
Yeah, because the version in the library doesn't have the amendments.
Yeah, no, it does not.
Okay, so if you can actually provide because I am going to probably read it.
Yeah, no, eventually.
Good for you.
Nice.
I say 200 pages, but it's like big print. Yes, I can send that to,
That'd be
I'll send it
great.
to Eric. It's eventually going to get codified into the code. It just takes time for them to get to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't know, I understand, but do you have a general sense of what the amendments were that council put in, what they changed?
Yeah, I mean, I have the council bill in front of me. So eventually it will be under 1523. Eventually adopt Bob's Rules of Order 2023 edition. The modified Rule 1.4 shall be supplemented to include upon recusal, a member may not leave the room. If recusal leaves less than a quorum eligible to vote on an item, the matter should be tabled to the next regular meeting at which quorum of members is available to decide the matter unless timely action is required. That's Rule 1.4. They took out a lot of stuff. 5.6 was amended to state presiding officer shall offer the moving member the first and last opportunity to speak to a debatable motion. Rule 7.10 was added to state immediately after the vote on a debatable motion, a council member may request an abstract of their comments and/or The presiding officer may request an abstract of all comments be entered into the minutes. The request for an abstract shall be added to the minutes unless the majority of the body presents an objection. They added 13.1, basically appointed a quorum allows a member to ask a body as a whole to review the act for the conformance with the rules. And there's actually a requirement of limitations table. And I can provide that to Eric. Then Rule 22 to amend to authorize debate on the motion for executive session, but only determine whether subject is appropriate for executive session. So they cut out a lot of stuff and only kind of modified some of it. It's essentially 2023 Ball Rules of Order.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Similarly, I would like to be able to study it too, so, I guess, would it make sense to purchase? I mean, how much is it to purchase?
Ooh, I don't know.
Would it make sense if there's a concern? Obviously, you'll have to do your research and see if you can distribute what you received from the CML, but would it make sense to have a copy available as we're somewhat new to the process of, structured?
Yeah, no, I think that's why the city made two copies available to the general to just ask for. I think that was the intention behind that. We do, in time, plan to make an updated cheat sheet.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have ever gotten the cheat sheet.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a laminated.
I have not.
I don't recall.
I think I got some PDF when I joined the commission that I had to like sign that said like.
Oh. I recall. I did not get that.
No.
There's this,
can
I don't know, like 6-page laminated thing.
The Colorado Municipal League website says you can get a copy of Bob's Rules of Order for Colorado local governments. A non-member price print edition would be $50. A non-member price electronic edition would be $25.
So we do, over time, someone in our office does plan to update whatever this cheat sheet is.
Sure. Okay, I mean, the cheat sheet would probably be effective, but it just seems to me that it'd be kind of neat to have that available to boards and commissions, one copy that could be referenced or whatever, but I don't know, just throwing that idea out there.
You're making me feel bad for not asking the clerks for their copies. Yeah, no, it's about 200 pages. It's a quick read. I mean, it's really big. I mean, if you're interested in procedure.
I mean, what could be more exciting than that, right?
You gotta stop prefacing it with that 200-page thing.
Yeah.
I mean.
Well, I mean, I actually read it, so.
Lucky you.
I was like, this wasn't so bad.
I suppose retention is the second problem. Getting through the first 200 pages and then.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just practice. It's just doing. If you really have questions, just watch the videos of other boards. I mean, city council meetings are good. Board of Adjustment and Appeals, just the way other boards are handling it. And cash can always suspend it.
Are there other questions for Sergio about Bob's rules? Melinda, did you have anything? I don't want to miss you.
No, no questions.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll probably have some other questions as we move forward, but thanks again for your time and presentation.
Always my pleasure.
Great. That brings us to number 5 on the agenda, which is the update on the Certified Local Government, the CLG, study session with council. And I don't know if that's Eric or Brian or both of you that has an update.
The biggest thing is what we'll be shooting for is early next year to go back to council. Just with our schedule right now, it's pretty hectic. How, from this group, do you want to organize that? I think in the past, there was the chair that went and gave a presentation. I wasn't here when it happened, but.
I think it was usually chair and another member up at the main area and then staff.
Okay. Do we want to start with this similar presentation? And then we can kind of update to what we've got now?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it if everyone is okay with that. I'm also happy to start working on a short presentation that covers and present it to this group so that we're all on the same page, that covers what I think are the persuasive points about why it should be a CLG.
We don't mind putting a presentation together and then letting, if you want to edit, and then we can come
Sure.
back to this group and say, hey, does this sound good to everybody else? And then take that.
Sure.
And then I think we
That sounds
anticipate that Lauren, am I making her name up, from the state that would be there?
Lindsay.
Lindsay would be present, so let's make sure, once we get a date, we'll get her on board, and if she has a presentation, we can incorporate it into ours.
Okay.
So that we have a state representative that can dispel any incorrect information.
I think it's the one she presented at the last meeting. It's like 6 or 7 slides. It's in this packet, the presentation about CLGs.
Right.
So,
And as, for me, that's the only update, is it'll be beginning of next year, and then we'll start coordinating what we want the presentation to look like with you all. And who all wants to be there. If the whole group wants to be there, we just need to know ahead of time so we can provide notice for all of you being in the same room at the same time. That kind of thing.
and I assume timing-wise, we have to have the presentation approved by this group the month before the study session. Would that be accurate?
We usually plan our study sessions months out.
Okay.
Most of the time it's a couple months out. So if we start shooting for, say, January or February, we can get something together hopefully by next month
Got it.
that this group can take a look at. I don't want it to get to where we're belaboring, very minimal items, and we keep pushing it down like November to December to January.
No, I would.
That we get a presentation nailed down and
Yes.
we can get it going.
And it should be the high points, because with council at study sessions or otherwise, we're going to get a very limited amount of time to make that presentation. So it should address what I think we all know the major concerns are, that it's not some conspiracy by the deep state or whatever it is that people think it is to take over the town or that type of thing. And we'll phrase it more eloquently than I just did. But yes, it needs to be high level. It needs to be probably less nitty gritty than what the History Colorado presentation is.
But I do want her to focus on the benefits
I agree.
this gives, and if there are any cons, let that be the time for folks to ask the questions, and
I agree.
Lindsay can answer them.
Those flyers were really impressive. I
In the
thought.
state.
I don't know, the ones that you sent in the packet about all the benefits, she talked about them, but they were, those flyers were just so clear about what the benefits were. I thought they looked great.
And we can also, when we come back with a presentation draft, we can work on what kind of backup materials we want presented. Because normally what goes to council is we have what we call a council communication, that's our staff report. And then generally the presentation that's going to be given, and any kind of backup materials that we want council to read, to study before we go up there and talk to them. So we can always include the stuff from the state. If there's anything else that anybody can think of that we want to include, that's the time to tell us, here's what we want to include in there, and then we will work to get that all council. We can start working on at least getting a date set.
And once we've presented at the study session, is there any sort of estimated timeline for when council will, discuss and vote on this?
So they'll usually give us direction at the study session, whether they
Okay.
want us to bring an item forward or not, or they may tell us, nope, don't want to hear about it. You'll usually get a direction. The mayor is really good at making sure that we get a direction if we're not hearing it from the group. He's really good at making sure that he lets them know, hey, we need to take a direction. We need to get a pulse on this item. We need to know, does staff need to bring I think it's a resolution back for adoption? Do they need to just not bring anything back? So hopefully we should hear. I don't know how it went a few years ago. If it was a resolution, did it get denied? Was it just a work session item?
Never made it to any formal resolution of ordinance of any sort. So I think, and if I remember correctly, it was last introduced prior to Sean Lewis.
Yes.
That was under
everything. So,
That's
yeah.
correct.
That was under Keck. So I think one of the comments that Eric Keck had made
concerns?
And he had concerns
Oh.
with doing it in other municipalities, because he had been in municipalities that had it. I don't have any other further context to that. That was, I'm not gonna say that that's what stopped it in its tracks, but it definitely created a little bit of resistance with it. And, so anyway, Eric is not around anymore, so Eric Keck is no longer here. So, Sean Lewis is, very historically minded, so hopefully he's more supportive of it this time. And if we can provide information, I think that equally shows the pros and the cons, I think it should be probably a more favorable discussion.
Well, I mean, we'll discuss this more when we go over the presentation. There are no cons to it as far as I see, because what the city council has approved with the code revisions is a historic preservation ordinance that meets the minimum thresholds to be a CLG. And so those are procedures that already exist. People can already protect landmarks through those procedures and through the process before this commission and the council. And so if those procedures are already in place and already exist, why would you not want people to get the benefits of the tax benefits that are allowable if you're a CLG? So I don't think there is any articulable downside at this point. Before, we didn't have this ordinance and this process. That was a different debate. That's already been put to bed. So that, I mean, you all can tell me if you disagree, but that would be how I will present it. There is no downside.
I like the energy with that. Keep that up. So, and that may have been also part of the discussion at that point, is that, we've struggled to have, the authority to do designation of property. And, at that point in time, we did not have that authority. So that would have been a much, much bigger leap. So now that we have that, I think that's a fair statement. So.
Yeah, and if you look at the collection of municipalities in Colorado that are CLGs, it's a very, and counties, not just municipalities, it's a very diverse group politically, geographically, socioeconomically of communities that are CLGs. So it's not a partisan thing.
Right.
Which I think it was some of the misunderstanding that came along with the last presentation about it. So, anyway, are there any other questions or thoughts on that? That'll be back on the agenda next month, because we'll look at the presentation so that we can move forward with getting in front of council early next year. All right, hearing none. The next item is staff's choice, Eric and Brian, or Brian.
I don't have anything.
The only thing I have is a question. Matt has the plaque up here, and this kind of leads to my question. The research that Matt's done is all local companies that can produce this. Is anybody against reaching out to not necessarily local companies? When I worked in one of the cities in Texas, we had a company in Oklahoma actually create all of our historic plaques. So is anybody opposed to me reaching out to outside of our geographic location? I think it was intentional that you reached out to local.
Yeah.
I mean, is anybody opposed to getting quotes from non-local?
If I may, I'll jump in here real fast and say that, obviously supporting local business in Inglewood is probably one of the preferred routes, and that's the reason why I reached out to local organizations. But the reality of it is, none of them will be manufactured here in Colorado. As I understand, there are very few manufacturers that do casting and forging of this sort of thing anymore. So Gemini is actually the biggest company that does it, and they're out in the Midwest. So chances are, when we receive a quote, it will likely, that's why a lot of the pricing seem to be about the same, because I believe they're referencing the same.
They're doing it secondhand, so they're just
they're
shipping it to somebody, they manufacture it, and then they sell it back.
And then they receive some sort of probably markup associated. I would guess that's how it works. But I'm not opposed to going, outside personally myself. I'm not opposed to going outside of Inglewood, but or outside of Colorado. If we can get a better deal, I think that's probably better for the funding of this group. But it is always nice to look first to local companies that support our Tax base?
No, and we'll for sure have all the information from the local companies that you've already reached out to and anyone else that we can find that can do this kind of work. So that you guys all have a big round pool to make your decision from. But if going to the source gives us the best price.
Absolutely. There's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
So,
The other one is something that we had brought up at another board, is the new, let me pull them up, the new council policies allow, and Sergio, correct me if I'm wrong, allow for our boards and commissions, if we're only doing things like a study session, to meet virtually. That, as long as we don't have any actionable items, aside from, I would assume, the minutes, because we're always gonna have minutes that we have to approve, but not having like a public hearing. Is that something that this board wants to entertain for items that we have when we just have study sessions? Page 20 here, Sergio.
So they're putting it back to the board's discretion, sort of the shift from the encouraging us to be in person
Right.
as much as possible.
Policy is more, Brian's right, he is right. The policies do not prohibit it, but they are a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, there's a lot of policy in there around like when a member can meet electronically. But the very last one is, despite the foregoing, a majority of voting members may designate meetings where no action will be taken, such as a study session, to be held electronically rather than in person. So if there are study sessions, I don't know if that means we just have to, have a voting item that says all study sessions will be virtual, or if we need to decide prior to each meeting, which is hard because we won't necessarily know if somebody's going to submit an application to get on an agenda. Most of the time, we'll be pretty positive that they won't because we have noticing deadlines that have to be met. But there are chances where we would meet as a group and then someone could submit the very next day and we would not have had any idea that it was coming in. And they may potentially be able to meet meeting deadlines. I don't know if that's something everybody wants to think about and we can talk about next week. Well, I talked to Sergio too to make sure I didn't just tell you something that we can't do. But the way I understand it, that's what we can do for study session only. But if we have an actionable item like a hearing, we have to meet in person.
So for instance, tonight's meeting, we don't have an application. We're not voting on approving or denying an application. Under what you're saying, this would be a meeting we could have had virtually, potentially.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Let me add, before others weigh in, let me ask a question. And I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but is it easier for staff to do these virtually? Does it let you get home, that type of thing?
It depends. I have a house full of noise. I have 2 dogs, a cat, a bearded dragon, 2 hermit crabs, 2 kids, and a significant other. Not to mention a neighbor that has 3 or 4 dogs. So I don't know I know at one historic preservation commission, you catch me on the microphone yelling at my dogs because I thought I had it on mute. So for me, it's probably easier for me to stay here because it's quieter.
Sure.
But that's just me. I mean, I also like to go home and see my family, but it's also much noisier at my house than it is up here.
Do you have a point of view, Eric?
Well,
You look like you have something.
So I have to go home and feed the cats in between. So at the end of the workday, I go home, feed the cats, and then come back. So it's an extra trip in for me. So I'm okay. I'm really okay either way, virtual or in person.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where I fall. I mean, certainly it helps to certain days to be able to do it virtually. I mean, when I'm at home, I live close by, but either way is fine with me. But what do others think about this?
I'm also fine either way. I have a question. So like next month, when we're discussing the presentation, would that be considered an actionable item or is that considered a study session? And I guess I have 2 questions. My other question is, if we say like next month's going to be a study session, what about members of the public? How are they able to participate if they want to?
Virtually, I mean, they
Okay.
would still participate. Kind of the way we ran our meetings prior to coming back to in-person. So they would have to log in, you know, we might put up a different set of instructions on the agendas. Most likely next month would be considered a study session. So we're just going over the presentation and, you know, making updates to it if we need to. It doesn't necessarily require any action on anybody's part. But I also understand, you know, I've been a planner for a number of years, and virtual meetings threw everybody for a loop. Because at the time we didn't know how to communicate with each other effectively through a computer. Context is very hard to read. For a lot of people, it's much easier to read each other sitting in a room and talking to each other. It's seems to be a lot very efficient. So honestly, I could go either way. It's really up to you guys, what you prefer. If you prefer coming in person, like I said, we're staff. We get paid either way. I think I tell everybody that. You guys are the volunteers and the decision makers in the group, not us. But it could also be something that benefits us during the winter. If the roads are icy, everything's frozen over. Or, you know, we have people that may be out of town and we worry that we may not get a quorum.
Well,
Let's
I
do
mean,
some virtually.
we've preserved this hybrid option because that wasn't explicitly barred by what the council did. And so we've had people do that for exactly those reasons. And so, you know, I don't as much anymore. I used to travel a lot for work. So I was on the road all the time, and it certainly is convenient for that. How soon before a meeting does there have to be a vote to change it to virtual?
It would be the meeting before, because we only meet once a month.
You can't do that over email?
It would be the agenda posting, and we want the material the week before the agenda's posted, correct?
Because it would change the agenda with the.
I mean, we could do our
instructions.
best to, you know, work on, you know, hey, the next meeting, we don't have any applications. Or we can try to work on the timing before we meet next time and give you more concrete information. I just want y'all to know that this option's out there, especially in the next few months.
Yeah.
It gets kind of cold sometimes, and the roads get a lot icier, you know, after dark. So,
The decision to move to a virtual meeting, is that officially an actionable thing where there has to be a motion and a second?
if we do that, yeah, that may be the issue, is we'd have to meet to take action to
Yeah, that's what I guess.
have a virtual meeting for the next one.
If it's officially actionable.
So if we have to take action to meet virtually for the next meeting, the meeting after that by virtue of it would have to be in person, because we couldn't take action at a virtual meeting. So it's kind of its own weird loop, and that you'd have to meet in person and then virtually meet in person and then virtually.
That's the snake biting its tail.
Yeah. So maybe it's more for like a one-off meeting every now and then, rather than all of our study sessions, so. It gets even harder to predict the weather a month out.
I mean, my suggestion would be, let's just leave it status quo and do this in person next month. But next month might be a meeting, now that we know this is out there. If we're going to have a December meeting that doesn't have actionable items, maybe, especially with the holidays and all that, perhaps that's a meeting to have virtually.
And we do reserve the right to not have a meeting if we don't have any.
Correct.
Right, and that's another
Also
part of
true.
it, is if we don't have any items at all, we can also just cancel the meeting. I don't think we have a requirement that this group has to meet a number of times a year. Other boards, we do.
I thought it was once per quarter.
Oh, once per quarter, never mind.
We're exceeding that.
Yes, so. But that was all I had. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's
Thank you.
attention. I think these policies were adopted in August, so still a little bit new to us.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. The Commissioner's choice, I have two things for Commissioner's choice. One, I don't know if you were all on this email, or if it was just chairs of boards and commissions, but on October 30th, you all got this email, the quarterly update from the city manager about all things Inglewood, I suppose. I'm going to try to go to that, so I just wanted to make sure everybody had seen that email, because I wasn't exactly sure of the distribution list for that. The second item that I had, and let me preface it by saying that I don't know anything about any other commissioner's home, and I'm not expressing an opinion about whether anyone's home qualifies for a designation under the ordinance or not. But I would encourage folks on this commission, if they believe that they do have a property that qualifies for a designation, to perhaps submit an application. You'll of course have to recuse yourself from the proceedings, but we have not received an application from anyone in the general public yet. So something to think about. That's all I have for Commissioner's Choice. Melinda, I'll start with you this time if you have anything for Commissioner's Choice.
I don't really have anything this time.
Great, thank you. Matt.
I do have a couple of things. I assume that we'll be talking about the plaques probably at the next meeting with the information, and you got all the emails that I received on that. Okay, and as a reminder, the Historic Inglewood Museum is open on Saturdays from 10 to 2. Encourage anybody interested to attend. We're still going pretty strong with the exhibit, and we haven't really decided when the exhibit is going to change to another one, but we're still going with the Cinderella City one now. So encourage you to stop by if you haven't already done so. And our lecture, I'm bringing up the information on the lecture this month, will be the history of Inglewood Lions Club, a century of service. And that will be on Tuesday, October 29th. There'll be 2 lectures. There'll be one at 2:30 in the afternoon at the Inglewood Library, and one at 6:30 p.m. At the Guild City Spark Space, which I'm trying to think is right across the way over here. So yeah, that'll be an interesting presentation. Please come if you're interested.
Thank you. Laura.
Nothing for me.
Alex.
Nothing for me.
Kat.
Nothing for me.
One thing I forgot, a question for staff. We have 1 vacancy still on the commission, is that right?
Yep.
Do you have any information on when that will be filled? Will that probably be an after the first of the year thing at this point?
They're gearing up for application. The clerk's office is gearing up for applications. I don't know exactly when that meeting is, when they will appoint, when they will fill vacancies and appoint new members and reappoint members. I do know that the clerk's office is gearing up for that, though.
Sounds good. Well, if anyone knows anyone that's interested, you should encourage them to apply to join our commission. But I wanted to ask that before we close the meeting. So that does bring us to the end of the agenda. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion from Lauren Cooper. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Matt Crabtree. So we'll be in adjournment. I have 7:13, Eric, but I'll defer to you.
I'm not going to trust that clock ever again. I got 7:13. All right, thank you, everybody.
It's got to be a record, though.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
How many specific dimensions did anybody ask for?
In the email, they're all should be